And LeBron James. LeBron spin. LeBron with a finish. Woo. Wow. Lakers have a chance to take the lead now. Down a point. Nice find by LeBron. Lillard, long three is up and in. Damian Lillard. Dame time, says Nurkic.
You know why? They don't have many three-point shooters.
Like that! Like that! Nurkic back on the floor. Give it to Carmelo Anthony for three. He's got it! Carmelo Anthony! With all of that action, Nurkic hammers one home. Portland Trailblazers, a 7-point victory over the Lakers in Game 1.
Lakers fall in Game 1 because it's Dame time. Oh, look who's here. The truth. There he is. Future Hall of Famer, Paul Pierce. Always good to see you, Paul, and can't wait for your analysis. I'll get to you in a moment. Stephen A., I'm told you have something you wanted to mention first, though.
It's something very, very important that I want to say. Welcome to the show, Paul, and I'm glad that you're on the show to hear this. And I wanted to say this to Max and Molly as well before we get into a basketball subject. Last night in the post-game news conference, we saw LeBron James, and we saw him wearing a hat. And usually it's one of those red hats, you know, the Trump supporters wear, make America great again. And LeBron James had that hat on and it was crossed out. And instead it talked about Breonna Taylor, the medical technician that was shot to death in March by the Louisville Metro Police Department. And LeBron said, how about, you know, I'm paraphrasing here, but essentially bringing attention to her death. And obviously there had been no arrest or anything like that because he didn't want people to forget. Remember that these guys went into the bubble, particularly in the aftermath of George Floyd's killing. And what they wanted to do was bring attention to these kind of things and not let basketball completely distract us from what their issues were and what their goals were in terms of bringing attention to these kind of issues. We owe it to LeBron James, we owe it to those players, and we owe it to all the folks associated with the NBA that have clearly committed themselves to assist the players in bringing attention to addressing these kind of issues. We're not passing judgment, we're not law enforcement, or rather we're not the courts, we're not the judges or anything like that. But the issue is about bringing attention to this stuff so justice is always served. The players care about it, the leagues care about it, and we have an obligation to make sure that we highlight and bring attention to it just like they're doing.
No question. She was murdered, and her killers are
Well
still
said.
Good job.
walking the streets. All right, Max, I want to start with you on this one here. I know you're a Lakers fan, bandwagon. I get on you for that. I know they're win now mode. They traded it all to get AD. So with that all being said, they have to win the chip this year, right?
No, and I never thought they did, and I picked the Clippers from the beginning. I think the Lakers, I think they have to win it next year. The pressure's really on, given LeBron's age, next year. But this is what happens, and Paul, I know when you brought the big three together, but that was a big three in Boston. When you push all your chips to the middle of the table for one player, you've exhausted all your resources. Believe me, if Kyle Kuzma had real trade value, he'd probably have been in that trade too. The reason he wasn't is because he didn't have much trade value. That's the reality of it. So they got to retain a young player. We'll see if he's a good player going forward. He's shown certain signs, but overall, there's a lot of room for improvement. When you push all your chips to the middle of the table, you to get that one centerpiece guy to go with your other star, you have to really luck out with the rest of the supporting cast. You usually don't have enough resources at that point in draft picks and salary cap space, whatever, to put the right pieces around them to win right away. So in this case, the Lakers did a great job. They did a great job identifying Dwight and JaVale McGee and Avery Bradley, but it's not like Bradley was amazing. He was a nice piece. You know, he could do some things, 20, 25 minutes a game. And the money they spent actually was on Danny Green, who's underperforming at the moment, but I thought that was a good idea at the time. But usually it takes that next season to gather some more resources, identify what else the team needs, and then you can go in and I think the Lakers might even be favored to win the whole thing next season if they can put the right pieces around them. They did as good a job as you can ask surrounding these guys, and still it's probably not going to be enough. It's the reason I like the Clippers, because they took out Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Danilo Gallinari from a 48-win team and just replaced them with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, superior players who do a lot of the same things but better. And so that team, coached by Doc Rivers, with all the supporting pieces they need, I thought they're ready to win now. The Lakers, I believe, next year is the year where they got to get it done. I never thought that was this year.
Well, first of all, I believe it was this year, and I believe it would have been this year if the bubble had never taken place and the season had never been suspended. I thought the Lakers were peaking right when we expected them to, and with all the pieces that they had in place, I thought that they would win the chip. Obviously, the bubble has changed my mind considerably about them because Avery Bradley's not there, Rondo's been out, and I don't like what I've been seeing in terms of their ability to hit perimeter shots, which wasn't that big of a problem going into before the season was postponed. But to answer the question directly, I do believe the Lakers need to win the title this year because think about this, Paul, and I'll give it to you. Whether it's Houston with Harden and Westbrook, whether it's Portland now, whether it's a young Denver squad, or obviously the odds-on favorite, the Clippers, because outside of Kawhi, nobody there really knows about winning championships, Doc Rivers and him, and of course Ty Lue. The bottom line is this. Whoever wins the championship this year, if it's not the Lakers, is going to have championship experience. And I think that's going to make them even tougher to knock off in the future. So I believe the Lakers' best chance of winning a championship in the LeBron James era is right now. I think if somebody else wins it other than the Lakers, I think it's going to be that much more tougher for the Lakers to win next year and beyond.
You know what I'm tired of? I'm tired of us, and Max, you and particularly, us making excuses of the best player of this generation. You don't trade for Anthony Davis to say, no, guys, we don't want to win this year. This is a building year. We're going to probably win it next year. When Doc brought us together, me, Ray, and KG, we said this year because we don't know what's going to happen the following year. And look what happened the next year. We won it the first year we got together. The next year, Kevin got hurt.
How many?
We dealt with injury problems. You,
KG, and Ray Allen.
The first year we got to, yeah, absolutely. But listen, you got.
Well, they went for Kawhi, but they couldn't get him.
You let him speak.
Let's stop making excuses. If they don't win this year, LeBron's not getting any younger. This is going to be a big hit on his legacy. And I've already said he's not a top 5 player of all time. If the Lakers don't win a championship, let alone lose in the first round, I don't want to hear none of this GOAT talk no more.
Well, I'll tell you this. You are right about this. If the Lakers with Anthony Davis and LeBron James lose in the first round, that's going to be devastating. I mean, a lot of stuff that we've talked. Listen, he don't win the championship. He doesn't win the championship. There's a lot of reasons that go into that. But to get knocked off in the first round, that's bad.
Yeah.
And it's going to be, and as bad as it's going to be on LeBron, as bad as it's going to be on LeBron, it'll be even worse on Anthony Davis.
Paul, I'm not the LeBron excuse maker. You got me mixed up with someone else. I'm the dude who sat here and said Kawhi's the best player in the world. Kawhi is better than LeBron, and the Clippers are going to win since the preseason. I also said I don't think this is the do-or-die season for the Lakers. Of course, they want to win. That's why you get Anthony Davis. That's why they targeted Kawhi. But when Kawhi wanted to compete against them, because that's the type of dude he is, he's competitive, and he jilted them and went to the Clippers, a lot of the guys were already gone. They had to spend their money where they could.
Really, where's the shooting next year? This team is built to win now. This year, they might have 8 new players come next year. I mean, who knows how they're gonna revamp the roster? They got to win now, Max. No more excuses. They got to win. Anthony Davis and LeBron James got to win now.
I think they got to win now because I don't think their chances improve next year. I think it gets that much more tougher, number one. But number two, I also want to say this. Max is right when he says he picked the Clippers from day one. It's just that what annoys me about his position, Paul, is that you act like we can't take the bubble into consideration. This is a once-in-a-lifetime situation that all of them are dealing with. You got players that are not there. It's like if coming into this bubble, would everybody have said the same thing they said in October? The likelihood is no, unless it was the Clippers, because nothing changed with them. But you got other teams where things have changed, particularly the Lakers. That does matter.
I agree.
It does matter.
I agree. I point something out. The Clippers have had chemistry issues all year. They've barely played together. And yet here everyone is. The Clippers haven't looked great recently. They didn't look good against Dallas in game 1. And yet we're not as worried about them. So I'm saying the bubble can affect the Clippers too. The difference is what we recognize is they were already a team. Before Paul George and Kawhi got there, they were a cohesive unit with continuity and a great coach who played together well. And then they added 2 MVP players. That's why I like them.
Fair.
That and Kawhi's a killer in the clutch.
That's fair.
So from the beginning, I like them.
That's
Same
fair,
reasons.
but when you've got a bunch of fragmented pieces that are coming together after being apart for 4 months because a season was stalled, we don't know whether or not they were training or eating a bunch of Snickers and cheese doodles and all of that. We don't know what the hell was going on
That's on
over
them.
those 4 months. I understand
them.
it's on them. I understand it's on them. I'm just saying, because of that, you don't know. That's why you don't know. You go into a playoffs able to feed off of what you did last week, the week before that, the month before that. But when you got a 4-month hiatus and people got to stay away from each other and quarantine themselves, you don't know what the hell is going on.
Hey,
Time out. Paul, who's
Max, I
making
got a
excuses
question.
for the Lakers? Me or Stephen A?